Welcome, everybody, to a new edition of UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, or UFO Man, and to my side is my co host, my friend, Tommy Highway. Tommy?
Folks, I want to welcome everybody tonight. My name is Tommy Highway. Thank you for joining us. We have a very, very special guest tonight, folks. One of the most compelling abduction stories that, frankly, I've ever heard. And her name is Debbie Jordan-Kauble, and she was the central figure in Bud Hopkins' New York bestseller, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods, and in the 1982 CBS miniseries of the same name starring Richard Crenna and Mare Winningham. To protect her family, she went by the pseudonym of Kathy Davis, and after a lifetime of continued experiences, she actually wrote her own book, Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders, to share her journey with the others who have actually been affected by this particular phenomenon. She's also a wife, a mother to 4, and a grandmother to 8. She lives in Kokomo, Indiana, and is a retired automotive industry worker and a licensed cosmetologist. She's also a member of Mensa and the Authors Guild, and she's also a member of the Authors Guild and the American Red Cross. So everyone, please welcome Mrs. Debbie Jordan-Kauble to the show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, ma'am. Thank you for being here with us.
Okay, Deborah, I want to ask you if you can give folks out there in the chat room a little bit of your background. How did you become involved with the UFO phenomena?
Well, I was born into it, I guess. I don't know any other way to answer that other than I was just born into it. It's not something I sought out. It just happened to me. I had strange things happen to me when I was a kid, a little kid, starting at about 6 when I went missing for an entire day. And again, when I was a teenager, and then a young married woman, and then the big incident of June 30th, 1983, which led me to Bud Hopkins. And from that came Intruders, his book. So that's how I got here. Birth.
Tommy?
I guess, how did your experiences start, and what are your first memories of having these experiences?
Well, my first memory of something strange goes way back to about 6. And obviously at 6, my memory was choppy, but actually my mother and my older sister remembered more about the event than I even did. And one time when Bud came to the house during the course of his investigation in Intruders and all of us speaking about things, he had asked Mom if there had ever been anything other unusual things with me when I was younger. And Mom told him about the time that my older sister, who was 11 years older than me, had taken me up to Michigan for like a weekend trip. She was going to go visit a friend, and I had known this friend's little sister, and I was going to go play with her. And I was really excited about that trip. And I remember playing kickball in the backyard. I remember kicking the ball over the fence and hopping over the fence to get the ball. And as soon as I got over the fence, it's like I wasn't sure where I was. I felt like I was lost, and I started feeling kind of panicky. And I remember going around to front of the house and not really knowing where I was. I remember I saw an open door, and I thought that was the house I should be in. So I walked inside, and it looked kind of familiar to me, but things were jumbly. Things didn't look right. And I remember feeling scared and started to leave. And as I tried to go out the door, there was a little boy in between me and the door, about my size. And he wanted me to stay and play with him. I mean, he looked like a normal kid, about my age, height, blonde hair, brown eyes. I remember the big brown eyes. And I remember that he wanted me to play, that he had a lot of toys, and kind of enticed me into, and I don't know what came over me, but I went and played I went to this room in this house, which in retrospect, the room didn't seem like it fit the house, and it was bright, I mean, you could see fine, but I don't recall seeing any furniture or lights or lamps or anything like that. I remember sitting on the floor, and it was kind of like a sunken living room thing in the middle of this floor. I remember sitting on the edge of it and putting a box on my lap, and the box had what I thought were like strings on it that you could pluck. I thought it was a toy that you like played, that we used to make stuff like that with shoe boxes and things. And I remember plucking on that, and I don't know what happened. I remember pain. My leg hurt. I got scared and I tried to run. I took off. I got out to the front door and was trying to leave. And the little boy was asking me not to leave. And I thought it was his mother came out from somewhere to another room. And she was really mad. And I thought she was a big, mean, ugly lady. And she said, "What is she doing here? She doesn't belong here. She needs to leave," and it felt like I was pushed out the door, but I don't remember anybody touching me. All I remember at that point is looking up, and at the end of the walk path on the sidewalk, I saw my sister, and she was just standing there. And as soon as I remember thinking, okay, I'm fine. As soon as I saw my sister, I wasn't afraid anymore. I just ran up to her, and I remember taking her hand, and she walked me back to the place where we were supposed to be. And that was the end of that, the weekend, and we went home. And I didn't realize all this. My mom and my older sister told Bud that I'd been missing for the whole day, and that the neighbors and everyone was out looking for me. The police had been called.
Wow.
And Kathy, my older sister, went out to look for me and came back with me. And she never, when, Bud asked her, "Well, where did you find her? She didn't remember. She just remembered once she had me." So that was bizarre. That was a bizarre. I didn't even remember the part about being gone all day, because what I just described to me, it seemed like it was, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. I had no concept of time. Mm-hmm. And I do recall, I think I remember Kathy didn't speak. We didn't talk. She didn't say like, "Oh my God, where have you been?" or anything like that. She just took my hand and walked me back to where we were supposed to be. And that was it.
If I may, when those people, the little boy and the other woman were communicating with you, were they doing so verbally? Like, were they speaking, or was it some other kind of communication?
I don't know. I don't remember that. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I mean, I was 6. And I'm 50. I'm 63 now. It's been a while, but I don't remember whether they were actually talking to me or not. I guess I thought they were.
What encounters do you remember after that?
Pardon me?
What encounters do you remember after that?
After that? When I was a teenager, I remember being out in the car. My girlfriend, she was driving, and we had another girl with us, and it was I was supposed to be spending the night with her. And so we were out driving around in the country late at night, spying on her boyfriend to see if he was where he was supposed to be, because that's what teenage girls did back then, I guess. And I first saw a light in the sky, and we're out in the middle of nowhere in Indiana, cornfields everywhere, And I saw this light flashing and moving weirdly in the sky, and I made some comment about it, and I pointed it out to my friends, and I said, "Oh, look, there's a UFO." And I kind of giggled. And I remember when I said that, the girl in the back seat, whom I didn't really know very well, she was actually a friend of my friend who was driving. She just started freaking out and got real scared. And at some point, she ended up behind our seats in the car on the floorboard, and she was crying and saying, "Don't say that. It's not funny." She was really scared. And I wasn't really that scared at that point. And then I recalled the light started getting closer. And then the next thing I remember, we're driving down the road, and it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We had to hurry up and get back to my friend's house and get back in the house before her parents' alarm went off for work, and they get up and find out we've been gone all night long. And later, I think this is one of the times when I actually did a little bit of regression with Bud, and we regressed to that time, and I recalled the car being pulled over, and I don't know where my friend had been driving, but I remember the car was like enveloped in this black fog like or mist. Everything was black. And then I recalled feeling that someone pulling me out of the car by my legs, and I can't see anything. And I think I passed out. And years later, and now the girl who was driving, we had been friends for a long time, but after that incident, and then after I, found out I was pregnant, like 6 or 8 months later, we are not 6 months later. I mean, about 4 months later, when I had the pregnancy disappear. So this happened in November. Pregnancy disappeared the following March. But anyway, after that, her and I kind of drifted apart, and I hadn't talked to her for years. So when Bud came to investigate, and one of the things we talked about, and he said, can I, think she'd talk to me? And I said, I don't know, probably. My sister, who was friends with her brother, got her phone number, and we called her, and she said, sure, come on over. So we came over and talked, and he said, so I want to ask you about the night that you girls saw the light. Do you remember that night? And she goes, you mean the light on in the sky or the one on the ground? And I looked over at her. I'm like, what do you mean the one on the ground? And she's like, well, it landed. The light came down out of the sky and landed in the field. We pulled over, and I'm like, I don't remember any of that. So she talked to Bud, told him what she remembered. And she said, I remembered saying, boy, time sure flies when you're having fun, kind of sarcastically. And he asked her if she would be interested in being regressed to remember more about this night. And she said, oh, no. She said, I don't want to know. And I'm good with that. And he's like, okay, if that's how you feel, that's the way it should be then. So that was, I was 17. And then I found out I was pregnant in January or February. And then March, the pregnancy was gone. So I had a strange dream. I found out I was pregnant by, and I'm assuming by my husband, to be my fiance at the time. And didn't want to tell my dad until I was sure, because, it was a different time back in the 70s,
Right.
So, and I didn't want to incur the wrath of Harry White unnecessarily. So Mom took me to the doctor, and I had a physical exam and I had a blood test, and the doctor's like, yeah, you're pregnant. And so my fiance and we were going to get married in June, but we moved the wedding up to April, so I wouldn't be huge, because again, different time. And then I was babysitting for my older sister. And I fell asleep I remember falling asleep on the couch, and I was listening to the Bob Newhart show, and I fell asleep on the couch with my back to the TV. And I felt someone kind of gently stroking my back, like touching me. And it kind of startled me at first, but then I immediately felt relief and relaxed, and I fell right to sleep. I think in my head, I thought it was just one of the kids snuggle up next to me, because she had 4 little kids. And the next morning I woke up and I was in my niece's bed, and immediately I thought, oh my God, there's something wrong with my baby. And I had this horrible, weird dream. And so I went to the bathroom to look and see if there was anything, amiss. And everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake this bizarre feeling, this creepy feeling that something wasn't right. So, and I kept telling the same girl that was with me that November out in the car, I kept telling her, there's something wrong. Something isn't right. And she's the one that said, well, come with me to Planned Parenthood. You can get a free pregnancy test there. It'll be positive, and then you'll calm down and shut up because you're getting on my nerves, or something like that. So I'm like, okay. I went with her. They gave me a pregnancy test. Well, she was getting her pills. And when the lady came back out and said, now your test was negative, if you don't have your period in a week, to go see your family doctor. I heard the test was negative, and then I just shut down. I just started freaking out. And I remember my friend in the car, I was pounding on the dash and crying. And she's like, just calm down, go tell your mom to take you back to the doctor, So I went and told my mom there was something wrong and I needed to go to the doctor. There was something wrong with the baby. I didn't feel right. And she took me back to the doctor. He gave me another pelvic exam, another blood test. And he told us to come in his office. And Mom and I went in there and sat down. And he said, you're not pregnant. And the first thing, my mom's like, oh my God, what happened? And he says, I don't know. She goes, does she need a D&C? I remember my mom asking him, does she need a D&C? Has she had a miscarriage? And he said, no, everything looks completely normal. And then he looks at me and he says, we see this sometimes. And I thought, my mind was blown. And he said, you're young, you'll have other children. And I suggest that, my advice to you would be to just forget this ever happened, because you're fine. You don't need any other medical, intervention. And I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to forget this. And we left, and it was never spoken about again. We never talked about it again until June 30th, 1983 happened. And I laid eyes on the mark in the yard for the first time. And one of the first memories that came back to me was that whole period of time when I was pregnant. And I had no idea why I connected any of that, So that was something weird that happened. Then when I was first married to the man that, I was engaged to, when that happened before, and we were newly married, and we'd gone to bed, and I was awakened by these two gray guys in my room. And I remember sitting up in bed, and I remember panicking and thinking, don't touch me. Just don't come any closer to me and I'll be all right. And then all of a sudden, all that fear went away, and I felt calm enough in my mind that they had a box in their hand, like a small red or black box with like a red light kind of either in it or on it, flat, And I remember saying to one of them, what is that? And can I have it? Because, nobody's going to believe me. And he said, no, you cannot have it. But when you see it again, you'll know what it is and you'll know how to use it. And then they took it from me and they kind of backed off and they just disappeared. And at first, when I could move, I tried to wake my husband up. He was laying right next to me asleep the whole time. And I desperately tried to wake him up and he would not wake up. And so what do? I just say, okay, I slide down and I go to sleep, which makes no sense. I'm quite aware of that. But the next morning when I woke up, I remembered all of it. So I told him I was just, frantic about it. And he kind of laughed at me and said, I don't know what you ate for dinner last night, but you probably ought not eat that again. And I'm like, oh, and I called my mom and I told my mom, and I was just so animated about it. I'm like, this was not a dream. Mom goes, are you sure it wasn't a dream? I'm like, no, this was not a dream. I'm telling you, this was not a dream. They were in my room. I don't know what they were. And my mom, when Bud asked her years later, she goes, I remember when she called me the next day, she was adamant that it was not a dream and that these things had come in her room with this box. And so my mom remembered, and she could, she confirmed that with Bud when he was asking about that. And that was after we'd gotten married, so that was after the pregnancy thing. So, and then, June 30, 83 came along not too long after that. And that was the big one. That's the one that left the mark in the yard. It had had the other witnesses in the neighborhood and messed me up for life.
Oh, please tell us, if you could go into more detail about that.
All right. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It was June 30th, 1983. I was living with my parents at that point. We were divorced and I had 2 little kids. And so I'd moved back home with them. And I was getting ready to go cut some patterns with a friend who lived behind us, who was a seamstress. She was paying me a little change to cut out patterns for her. I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing my hands, looking out the window, and I noticed a strange light in the pump house. There was a swimming pool in the backyard, and it had a pump house. It was probably like the size of one of those little mini barns you get in Lowe's. You see them in the parking lot. It was a little smaller than that, but not much. It was a good size. Anyway, I noticed the door was open and there was a light in there, and it just struck me kind of odd. And I told Mom, there's a light out there. And she's like, don't worry about it. I'm like, okay. So few minutes later, I went to get in my car and leave to go to Deanna's house. And the driveway the house is a tri-level, and the driveway was a Y split. One part went down the front where the garage was, and the other part went along the side, which you could drive past the pool. And then in the very back, my dad had a workshop, and there was a turnaround back there. And I thought, I'm going to drive on the side drive and hit the turnaround just to make sure I didn't see anybody out there messing around, because Daddy had like Indian motorcycles that he was restoring out back here. And I mean, a lot of expensive hobbies back there. And I was thinking of burglars, not aliens, not at all, So I drove down the turnaround and looked around, didn't see anything, and went on to the friend's house. But I did notice the door to the garage, the pedestrian door on the back of the house. I noticed it was open, and I thought, I don't think that's supposed to be open. So when I got to my friend's house, like 2 minutes later, I called Mom just to let her know that I did see that the door was open on the garage door. And at first she was like, no, don't worry about it. Your dad will be home for long and he'll shut it. She said, I'll just lock the door. I said, okay. So I hung up the phone, and just right after I hung up, she called back. And she said, I need you to come home right now. And I said, why? It kind of freaked me out because this was not like my mom. And she said, I just need you to come home right now. And my friend and her husband, who were behind me, I think they heard the panic in my voice a little bit. And Larry says, tell her to call the police. That's what we pay him for. And she heard him, and she said, I don't want anybody here but you. I'm like, okay. So I told my friends, look, I'll be back shortly. I'm just going to run back here just to make sure everything's all right. So I went back home, pulled up the side drive, and I parked now next to the house on that side drive again. And I went into the little Florida room because Mom was in there. And Dad had a shotgun that he always kept next to the trash compactor back out there. And when we moved back in, I had asked him to please don't leave that loaded with my kids here. And my mom says to me, that's not loaded, right? And I go, yeah, I do. But whoever's out there don't know that. I can get close enough to them to hit them with it before they figure it out, and that bravado from me was actually out of character, because I was 23 years old. I was not brave like that. So whatever possessed me to go out there looking around, or even pick up the gun, because I didn't even like guns back then. I didn't even like touching them. And I'm out there like Elmer Fudd looking all over the place. I walked out behind the pool, checked the doors of the workshop. I found my dog, who'd been in the garage, was under Dad's ladder truck, but she wouldn't come out. So I left her, and I went back across the yard, pump house, checked the pump house. And then I went into the garage, and I flipped the light on, and there wasn't anybody in there. There was a set of mattresses leaned up against the wall. And I thought, if anybody's in here, that's the only place they could be hiding. So I'm kind of lurching around, throwing a cuss word here or there as I go around this, thinking I'm going to catch somebody hiding behind these mattresses. And all of a sudden I feel weird. I felt hot. I felt like it got to where I felt like I was on fire. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I got to get out of here right now. And I headed to the open door. And when I got into the doorway, something hit me like right in your solar plexus area right here. It was like a ball of light and it hit me there. And I could feel my body vibrate. And it started with a shaking and the light got so intense that my eyes felt like they were on fire. And I know my eyes were closed, but I could see the light still, like through my eyelids. It was so intense. And I could feel this vibrating spread from my center down my legs and arms and my head. And it was like, I don't know how long I was like that, because I don't remember. I say time stopped. It's like when you watch a car accident and everything goes in slow motion. I mean, that's how I felt. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm dead. But then the vibrating and the vibrating became so, I couldn't move. The vibrating became so intense that I could almost feel, it almost felt like every single molecule of my body individually vibrating, like I could feel it. And like I said, I don't have any idea how long I was in that condition, but suddenly the light dimmed, the strength of it let up, the vibrating turned into shaking and then finally stopped. And at that point, I felt like somebody had pulled down on this shoulder from behind. And I felt this pain in this ear. It felt like fire. In my mind, I visualized this knitting needle on fire, on hot red, going in my head. But I couldn't move. I couldn't resist. I couldn't scream. And then I heard this voice say it was unfortunate that I had felt this pain. And then I don't know how, I am now out on the cement patio, out from that door, and about 25 feet in front of me, out in the yard, I see this ball of light. It was about the size of a basketball, and it was soft. It didn't hurt to look at. And it went down really slow, and it came back up. I see movement out in the yard, and my eyes are blown. I can't, it's like flash bulbs, blotches in my vision, white blotches all over my vision. They're just blown. But I could see movement in front of me. I could see that there was somebody in the yard, and there were like 6 what I thought were kids in the yard. And I thought, why are these kids in my mom and dad's backyard? I can't, it's dark out. My eyes are wrecked. I know there's some little kids out there. I can't see them really good, like to get a lot of detail about what they look like, but I know they're like coming from all over the yard. And then they kind of lined up over by the driveway. And they just, at that point, they just kind of slid down in front of me. They didn't really come to me. They just slid down in front of me. And that's when I saw the thing in the yard. As I watched them, I don't remember seeing them go in it, but I know that there was a thing in the yard. We call it, a craft of some kind. In retrospect, it was too small for 6 even kids to get in it and fly anywhere. So I have no idea what it was. Those little legs were so skinny that I can't imagine they would support a lot of weight. And yet I felt as if at some point this thing was bobbling or wobbling just ever so slightly. And I couldn't tell whether it was my eyes because they were so messed up, or if it was actually this thing wobbling a little bit, like it wasn't completely on the ground all the way, and those things were stabilizing it. I mean, this is just in my mind. I'm thinking it, after the fact. And then I remember looking at it and immediately didn't want to look away, and then thinking I can't not look at it because I need to know where it is in relationship to me at all times, because if it comes any closer to me, I'm going to die, and then the next thing I remember thinking after I'd saw the kids is I thought, oh my God, my kids. Because, my kids were in the house with my mom and dad, with my mom. And immediately that voice that come from somewhere said, your children are okay. And then the next thing I remember is hearing my name. But this time when I heard my name, it was like somebody snapped a finger and I woke up from this nightmare and I could move, and I turned towards where I heard the name and I started to walk. I got to the steps. There was steps in the back and then another upper patio. That was where the kitchen door was, the back of the house. Like I said, it was a tri-level. And my mom was standing there and she kind of opened the door and she says, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, everything's cool." But I had just, whatever all had just happened was completely wiped out of my mind. I just felt weird. I felt creepy. I felt gross. I felt weird. I felt like I wanted to get wet. I don't know why. I just thought, I don't want to cut patterns anymore. I want to go swimming. So I called my friend and I'm like, how about you guys, how about we go swimming instead of, cut tonight? We can cut tomorrow or whatever. And she's like, that's fine. I can't remember whether I went back to their house and got them or they just came back to mom's house. It was my friend and her daughter, teenage daughter. So they came and we walked across the backyard to the swimming pool. And at some point when we walked across the backyard, her daughter steps on something and, she's like, "Oh, my foot hurts." And, "Oh, my foot's getting numb. It tingles." And her mom thought maybe she'd stepped on a bee, so we looked her foot over for a stinger and didn't see anything. And so we went and got in the pool and we weren't in the pool very long. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or so. And, we all started feeling really nauseous. And my head was hurting and my eyes hurt really bad. And I started to notice halos around the lights because now it's dark out, and I'm noticing halos around all the lights outside. Kind of like, and it reminded me of like when you were a kid, if you went swimming underwater in chlorine, you open your eyes and, except I never got my head under the water. So my friend says, "Hey, let's go to White Castle." Maybe we get something to eat, we'll feel better. And I don't know if y'all know what White Castle is, but we called them gut bombers here back in the day. But so we were going to go to White Castle, and I can't remember. I don't think that we actually ended up going, but then at that time, by then, Dad had come home, and they left. And I went to bed. And when I woke up the next morning, my eyes were swollen shut and they hurt so bad that I felt like I was going to throw up. So my mom took me to the emergency room. And I don't know how, but there was a doctor in the emergency room who was an actual eye doctor. And I don't know what he was doing there because I don't think they normally hang out there. And, he looked at me and he asked my mom if she could take me across the street to his office because he had better equipment there to look at me better. And so she did. They took me there and they worked me in immediately. And the first thing he asked me is, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? Have you been around welding? Have you looked at the sun? I'm like, no. And I didn't tell him about the light because I still didn't remember it at that point the next day. So drops, creams, he said he couldn't believe that my eyes had been normal yet the day before because they were so bad. And as a side note, before I forget, I just want to let you know that from that point on, my eyes were never right. Now I have one blue eye and one green eye. I became extremely farsighted. And I had never worn glasses before. I was diagnosed with macular degeneration and cataracts in my 30s. And now I have brand new acrylic lenses. They had to remove my lenses and replace them by the time I was 50, which is still pretty young. That's how bad they were. And they still water and turn red for no reason. And I got super dry eyes. I developed super dry eyes extremely young as well. So whatever happened that night, I blame that night, but I have no proof. That's just my gut feeling. But anyway, the following day, or a few days later, and my eyes were feeling better. They were open and, they were still hurting. It took a while for that to heal, several weeks. But I was in much better shape by the weekend, which was the 4th of July weekend. And the entire family was coming over, as they always did, to shoot off, copious amounts of Kmart fireworks and annoy the neighbors and swim and barbecue, because mom and dad had the big pool. I remember all the kids, we were in the kitchen getting the hamburgers and stuff ready. And the kids all came tearing through the house and out the kitchen door to the pool with their towels and whatnot. And my oldest nephew came back in and he said, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" And so we all put down what we were doing, and all the adults that were there went out there, and we're all kind of standing around this mark in the yard. And my mom says, "Well, that's where our UFO landed." And I looked at my mom and I remember thinking, "What is wrong with you? Why would she say?" Because she was kind of laughing and thought it was cute. And I don't know, it didn't strike me as funny. And it was like somebody flipped me in the head, kind of flicked me in the head with their finger and said, "Hey, listen," and I looked at the mark again. And then I started to remember. I started to remember that light and that night and those kids in the yard. And I had been acting bizarre for a couple days. I had gotten to the point where I was staying up all night and sleeping during the day because I couldn't sleep at night. And I would sit between my two kids' bed like I was waiting for something. And I couldn't go to the bathroom in the bathroom upstairs with the window that overlooked that area. And this was even before I realized the mark was there, because I kept thinking something was going to grab me and take me out through that window. And I literally had to go down to the basement to use the bathroom if it was at night. Now, during the day, it was okay. I was fine. And after that June, after the mark in the yard showed up and I started to remember things, I literally think I felt like I had a nervous breakdown. I was a hot mess for months. I got really sick. I developed, my glands would swell up for no reason. I'd get rashes. I developed a horrible, irregular heartbeat. And it was so bad that I ended up in the emergency room several times and then worked up by a cardiologist. My pulse rate's always been low, about 60. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't like a tachycardia racing. It was like a flip-flop where I would stop. So if you feel my pulse, it would go ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. It just missed beats. And there were times when I'd have 60 beats a minute and I'd miss 20 or 25 of them, and it would literally take my breath away. So they put me on something called Intruders, which made it slower. But eventually that wore off. Several years passed, and I had a couple more real bad spells of it. And now I haven't had a spell like that for probably 10 years, But in the beginning, after June 30th, 83, it was intense, and it was relentless for at least a couple years. My hair got real thin, and it never did come back all the way, even my eyebrows. And my fingernails got the real paper thin and had horizontal lines on them. My toenails still have horizontal ridges on them, not the up and down ones, but, cross. And my dog, who had been out there that night, of course, and this was in the last of June, and by fall, I think it was about September, she had to be put to sleep. Her hair started falling out real bad, and we first thought she had mange. But it got to the point where it was coming out even in spots where she couldn't rub, and she was getting big black sores all over her. Her teeth were falling out in the food bowl. Her eyes got all whited over. Now, she wasn't young, but she wasn't terribly old, and she just deteriorated so quickly that we finally had to put her down because she was just gone. And in the back of my mind, I always worried, what if it was because she was out there that night? What if they did to her what they did to me? And what if I'm going to end up like her someday? You know, I've had a lot of weird health issues over the years. And I have no proof, but I kind of sometimes wonder if there's a connection. So no, I don't have a heart murmur. They checked me for that. And they're, you know, my resting pulse rate's always been low, and doctors have always been happy with that. It's just when it stops beating, that's kind of inconvenient. And then, of course, you know, that creates a lot of anxiety, which doesn't make it any better. So, and then I had I was diagnosed with PTSD, you know, an anxiety disorder. But anyway, right before June 30th happened, I had picked up a book in the library called Missing Time. It was by Bud Hopkins. I kind of only halfway, I had no idea what was fully involved in this book. But as I started to get into reading it, I would have so many bad panic attacks that I couldn't finish. And eventually my mom says, yeah, you need to take that book back to the library because we can't afford to keep going to the emergency room. Because I think I was having a heart attack, and I go to the emergency room and it was just a panic attack. So, but one of the things I remembered when I saw the mark in the yard was Missing Time. That popped back in my head. And it said, in the back of the book, there was a place where you could write to the author if you thought you'd had this kind of experience. And that's what I remembered. So I went back and got the address out of it. And I wrote Bud this like 14-page letter and sent a bunch of pictures. And then eventually my mom mailed it. And I saw that question, was my dog abducted? I don't know. All I know is I found her underneath Dad's ladder truck, and she would not come out to me. So I don't know what the poor thing saw. But anyway, I was out with some friends one night, and when I came back home, my mom said, hey, that guy that you wrote that letter to called tonight. And I'm like, oh my God. What? She said, his phone number's up there. You can call him back if you want. Did you go back in the day? That was a long distance phone call. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet, you know, like at least I didn't. So, you know, she was giving me permission to make a long distance call on her phone line. So I went over and I dialed the number, and I remember my heart was just about to beat out of my chest because I still wasn't sure if I should do this, you know? And so, but then as soon as I heard his voice, you know, that was it. And 3 years later, Intruders was written. But, and I was just reaching out to him because I was desperate for somebody to help me, tell me something, you know, even if you tell me you're crazy. The first trip I had to New York, I sold my washer and dryer to get enough money to buy a bus ticket to go there. And I about jumped off the bus halfway there because I thought, oh, what are you doing? You're going to New York City to see a guy who wrote a book about UFOs and abductions, which is crazy. You're crazy. What is wrong with you? You're a mother. He could be an axe murderer or something, you know? And so I had a panic attack and about jumped off the bus. But first thing that happened when I got off the bus in New York and he met me there is he took me to see a psychiatrist. She talked to me for a while. She gave me a light induction of hypnosis just to calm me down, you know, and to show me what it's like, because I thought I don't want somebody hypnotizing me and making me bark like a dog in the middle of the street, you know, or something like that. She's like, that's not how it works. But, and then eventually I went back a couple more times. And one time when I went back, he took me to a hospital in New York. Somebody had donated either money or the services themselves. And I had a CAT scan with a dye, and I had an EEG where they put the wires on your head. And then I had psychological testing, verbal and written. That was like 6 hours worth. And I remember telling the psychiatrist who was testing me, I'm like, it's okay if you tell me I'm crazy. I mean, they make pills for that. So I'm okay with that, you know, because I just didn't want any of this stuff to actually be real. I was still telling myself it just couldn't be. So anyways, here I am.
Well, if I may, what exactly inspired you to write the book? When did you make that decision?
My book?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Bud wrote Intruders and he first went out and did like a press junket, that's the way they used to do, this is before Amazon publishing and all that stuff and Zoom. You actually had to go places to be interviewed. And it was a bestseller. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. So, they had him out everywhere. And I went with him. He brought me with him so I could meet other people and tell my story firsthand. But it scared me to death. I really wasn't feeling it. The first time I ever spoke in public, I almost passed out. And I told the people I'm about to faint. So, because this is not, I did it because Bud spent 3 years of his life and all of his money to help me and my family. And he worked hard on that book. And I felt like I almost kind of owed it to him to be there and help him because he helped me. And all the people that have had experiences like mine, I felt like I wanted to pay that forward too. And in the course of going around with him to be interviewed and also to speak at conferences, I met tons of people just like me. Some of them have stories that are way more bizarre than even mine, and they're living with it every day. I would venture to say for every person like me or Whitley Strieber or Tom or anybody else or Travis Walton that's out there that's been telling their story, for each one of us, there's probably 50,000 people out there. Everybody's got a story. Most people aren't going to ever tell you.
Right.
And if you think you don't have a story, I bet you ain't paying attention, because life can be distracting. But so after all those years and meeting all these people and hearing all these people struggling just like I did and feeling so blessed because I got so much time with Bud and I got the support of my family and friends and neighbors and stuff that most people never have, I felt like I wanted to share my story with them and show them how I've managed to live with it, live through it, live above it, live and learn from it, all these years, and go from this terrified 23-year-old that thought she was having a nervous breakdown to someone now here who, if I was given the choice to whether I could have this experience or not have it in my life, I would choose to have it. Because,
hey, Deborah, can you tell us what the graves look like?
That
right there.
Yeah, pretty much. Everybody, a lot of people laugh at me because the turtleneck. I don't know what that is. I just know that it was part of what their head was sitting on. The skin was very pale, kind of grayish, whitish pale. The eyes were huge and liquidy. It's hard to describe it. It was almost like the eyes were alive in and of themselves. They kind of shimmered and you kind of fell into them. You're mesmerized by them, and they weren't very tall. I'm 5'3" and I was taller than them. I'm bad at guessing, but I'm going to say maybe about 4.5 feet tall, something like that. And slender, but arms seemed longer than regular people arms, and 3 fingers instead of 5, I think, longer and skinnier.
Was the middle one longer than the other two?
One of them was longer. I don't know which one it was. I didn't get that close a look.
We've had that report from many people. That's why I was asking. Tommy?
One of the, I think, most intriguing parts of your story is that at some point, I guess you were actually on board a craft and you were introduced to a child. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was after the June 30th. Was it after, or did I remember it after? I can't remember now. Now I think it was after June 30th because this child would have been, let's see. Yeah, she probably would have been 4 or 5 years old, maybe. Um, I just remembered having a dream that I was picked up, and I believe that it was when I woke up in the backyard on my back in the grass looking up and saw the like horseshoe-ish kind of shaped craft right above me. And I went to try to get in the house and the door was locked. And my mom actually opened the door and let me in, but she doesn't remember letting me in. But that prior to that, I don't know how I got there, but I was in a big examining room. I know in the video in the Intruders, the movie, they made it look more like a dark cave. I think if it's been a long time since I saw it, but it actually was more of a big room. And I was upset because I wanted to go home. And I remember seeing them come through this archway, this open area, and it was two grays on either side of this little girl. She looked different than them. And as soon as I saw her, I thought, oh, that's mine. And I mean, instantly, I wanted to reach out and grab her and hug her. And as soon as that thought went in my head, it's like she could hear what I was thinking because she immediately kind of dipped behind one of these grays and clutched onto them and peered at me like she was afraid of me. And all of a sudden it made me want to cry. And then I realized, okay, if this is all she's used to, I must look pretty weird and scary, but it's like she could hear what I was thinking. And then I got upset and I was mad and I'm like, that's mine. I want to take her home with me. And he was communicating with me, but I don't recall seeing a mouth move or anything like that. And he says, or like call him he, I felt was a male energy. He says, he didn't understand why I was upset, that it was a good thing and that I should be happy. And I said, I want to take her home. She's mine. I want to take her home with me. And he's like, you can't. She wouldn't survive with you. And then I was sad. And he's like, don't be sad. You'll see her. You'll see her again. And then he says something to the effect of, you have to leave now because you can't be here much longer or you're going to get sick. And so I leave. I'm standing up and he moves me to a different area. And I remember in this dream or whatever this is, I remember him looking at me, and all of a sudden it felt like every emotion that a human being could have kind of like hit me all at once. And I thought, oh my God, it almost buckled me. And then I realized it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from him. And then the next thing I remember, I'm laying in the grass looking up. So it was bizarre.
We have a comment from Julia White. She says, Deborah is easy to listen to and understand. Her story is resonating big time.
Well, thank you. White's my maiden name. And we're probably related somehow.
Okay, one thing I was going to ask before Tommy asked his question was, this craft right here, this wasn't the horseshoe, was it?
No, That's the front-facing view of the other one that you had. That was an experience that happened in April, I think of April of 84. It was right after the June 30th, 83 incident. And I had gone out to, I did things in weird times. I had been giving myself a manicure and I ran out of fingernail polish remover. So I was going to scurry down to the village pantry, open 24-hour convenience store and snatch some and come home. So I went as I was coming home, I noticed these lights coming towards me, coming from the west side of Indianapolis, and the airport's over there. So at first I thought, okay, that's just that's an airplane with its landing lights on, and it's coming in for a landing in Indy. But then it did something weird, and I think it changed from 3 lights to 1, and I thought that doesn't happen. And it got really big and brighter. And then something inside of me triggered and thought, oh, this is not good. And I put the pedal to the metal. I squealed into the driveway. Gravel flew everywhere. I ran into the front door, and I was yelling as I ran in the front door, Mom, get out here really quick. You got to see this. It's coming. And she got up off the couch and she ran out. And just about the time her and I both got out onto the front porch, we looked up, and it was like the house that has big trees all the way around it, but there's this open space above the house. And here this thing came gliding right above treetop level. And it was so quiet. You could hear a hum, but this thing was massively huge. It filled up the whole space above the house. And as low as it was, it should have been deafening if it was actually a plane. And it was going slow. And it got right above us where we are at the front porch. And as soon as it got above us, it was like all these lights turned on. The bottom underside of this thing just went whoop. You could feel the lights in your chest as it turned on. And there was like bars of light, like fluorescent tubes, and little dots of light. And then there was a tiny little red light in the center, and there was other little lights around it. And my mom, I turn around and I'm thinking to myself, not again. I mean, I'm in panic level 100 out of 10. And I look up and I look over at my mom, and she is standing there, head up, mouth hanging open. And she just says, oh my God, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, I looked at her like, oh, okay. And as it passed over the house, I left her on the porch. I ran through the house, out the kitchen door, out the back door. And I'm out on that back porch again. And I just in time to see it coming over the back of the house. And I watch it. After it gets out from over our house, the lights go off. The underside of the lights, they shut back off. And then it's just like a dark silhouette, except a little bit in the front. I watch it. It gets over about 465 there at Shadeland Avenue. And instead of making a banking turn, it just flips. It just like turns on its axis, right there, and then starts headed right back west again. Only it's a little bit farther north of us now. So it's almost be like, over Ford Motor Company plant or something over in there, over that way, headed back towards Indianapolis. Now, Indianapolis is a big city. There are millions of people that live there. So we're thinking, holy crap, this is going to be all over the news. This is going to be in the newspapers. Mom's like, Debbie, turn on the radio, because people would used to call into radio stations with stuff all the time. Didn't hear nothing. Bud had given me the phone number for CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies up in Chicago, and MUFON. Well, CUFOS, I picked that one up, and it had a 24-hour UFO hotline. And so I called it. And it was like 11 o'clock at night by the time I called it, 11:30. And Dr. Heineck answered the phone. And so I talked to him, told him what we'd seen. My mom talked to him. He said he wanted us to draw what we saw individually and write what we had seen. And we sent it to him. Then that's the drawing that you saw that I did. But that's I think that's a reproduction of a drawing that I did. Yeah, those were done in 2021 because we got hit by a tornado and a lot of our stuff got destroyed. But and that's basically what I saw. Mom saw the same thing, except she didn't see that dark part. So it was more like a boomerang for her. But anyway, I think Mom talked to Dr. Hynek twice. I talked to him once, and I remember that she said that he told we couldn't believe that nobody else had reported this thing. The next morning, there was nothing on TV, nothing in the newspapers, and this thing was absolutely massive and just above treetop levels over a city with millions of people. We lived 15 minutes from downtown Indianapolis, the Circle. So it's not like we lived way out in the country. It was suburbs. And Dr. Hynek told my mom that he was beginning to feel like maybe not everyone could see these things based upon cases that he had seen. And it would certainly make sense to us because there's just, I couldn't believe that nobody else saw this, reported it. But Dr. Hynek, maybe he was right.
Maybe people saw it, but chose not to.
Well, there might be some, I'm sure there was probably some of them, because I can't believe that we're the only people that saw that in the whole city. We may be the only ones that talk about it, but literally a million of people should have seen that, hundreds of thousands. So,
Tommy?
One of the things that it seems to be a common theme with abductees and those kinds of experiences are we found that in many cases, in fact, most cases, it's generational. So I guess my question is, have your children actually had any kind of experiences or grandchildren or anything like that you're aware of?
Well, obviously, yeah, my sons, the weird stuff was happening, at least with my youngest son. When we were living at Mom and Dad's, we were awakened one morning by my oldest son screaming bloody murder. And when we got into the room, he was stiff as a board like this in the bed and he wasn't moving, but he was screaming. And in the other bed, there was twin beds. And the other bed was my younger one. And he was still basically asleep, sleeping through the screaming, but he was covered in blood. I mean, he had a horrific nosebleed in the night and it was just everywhere. And my older son told my mom, the little man with the big head in the closet tried to take my brother. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? We ended up having to take him to the emergency room and they cauterized up in his nose. The doctor's like, oh, he poked something up in his nose. I'm like, I don't know about that because I was pretty good with keeping pokey stuff out of their room. And then he insinuated that maybe poked his fingernail up there, but his little nose and his fat finger just wasn't getting it. I just was suspicious and it made me sick to my stomach. So that happened. And then my granddaughter, she's 15 now. When she was about 4 or 5, she started having night terrors and it was so bad. And my son actually got mad at me. I'll never forget. And he called me and he was yelling and he never does that. He's like, what did you say? What have you told her? Or what has she seen at your house? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, she is screaming bloody murder that the aliens are trying to come through her window and take her. And I said, oh my God. I said, we had a rule. We had a rule with my kids and there was a rule with her. We don't talk about it around them for 2 reasons. 1, we don't want to scare them. And 2, we don't want to contaminate their memory in case when they get older, they have something they want to talk about or remember, you know?
Right.
So my son, he swore up and down that somehow at my house, she had picked up something. So he didn't let her come stay with me for like 3 months, which just broke my heart. He said, wait till we get this under control. He had to put different curtains on her windows. He made this stuff he called alien go away spray. It was, you'd take like a can of air freshener and put a new label on it and got her a radio and a nightlight and stuff like that. And after a few months, it finally let up and went away. And then from that point on, she was fine. I was still very careful about not letting her see anything, even like on TV now, there'll be commercials and you'll see them. And I mean, what are you going to do about that? I just try to grab the remote and flip it as fast as I can. Well, one day she was about 14 and she had spent the week with me, and we were sitting on the couch watching TV, and there was like a commercial came on for Ancient Aliens or something. And I thought, oh hell, at this point, she's 14, she's heard it at school and everywhere else. And I just kind of ignored it. And after the commercial was over, she turned around and looked at me and she said, "Hey, Nene." And I said, "Yeah," because that's what she calls me, Nene. She goes, "Do you believe in aliens?" And I just looked at her and I said, "Yeah." And that's all I said. I didn't say anything else. I just said, "Yep." And she said, "Good, so do I." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking in my head, okay, now she knows. If she ever has something she wants to talk about, she knows that I'm safe to talk to about it, So there's that. And then my mom was adopted. My mom was adopted from an orphanage in Louisville, Kentucky when she was 2. She was adopted by a sergeant in the Army and his wife, who then took her to China. He was actually like one of the security guards for General MacArthur. And so she lived in China. She went to the Philippines. She went all over the place as a little kid. But at one point when they ended up back in Kentucky and Louisville, she has a memory of being chased through the woods by a little blonde-haired boy. And for some reason, he scared the hell out of her, and she didn't know why. That's the only memory she had. And I didn't even know about that. I had no idea about that until years later when Bud started to interview the whole family. Bud had a way of asking questions that could just make you remember so much stuff. He was like so good at what he did.
He's a great loss.
Oh, absolutely.
Major loss. We do have a question that's been asked in the chat room. Are you concerned at all that that your children are, I don't know, part alien or have some sort of alien genetics or something like that?
I think we're all aliens, frankly. I think we're all hybrids. We're all aliens. I'm not concerned about it. My youngest son, he laughs every now and then when strange things happen, and he says, "Oh, that's just the alien in me." I said, I just say, "Okay." I can't do anything about it. So who knows?
Well, if I may, and this is, can I ask you a personal question, please?
Well, sure.
The one fetus that you lost, was that the only one? Because we've actually had reports where women have actually lost several over a period of time. Is it just the one for you that you're aware of?
That's the only pregnancy that that was confirmed that I'm aware of. I did have another, what I call a dream, and I don't know that it wasn't a dream. I don't know, where I was holding a little boy, and he looked really human, but he was extremely frail and tiny. But the weird thing about him was, and he had brown hair and brown eyes. But the strangest thing about this little baby that I was holding is that when he looked at me and our eyes met, I felt like that this baby was the wisest soul in the world. And like he was a million times smarter and wiser than I would ever be. And for some reason, I got the feeling that he was even encouraging me to hold him tight and have contact with him and love him, because it was feeding him in some way. So, but as far as pregnancies goes, that is only one that I was certain that I was pregnant. It was confirmed by a doctor and all that.
Interesting.
Wow.
Tim?
I have to say that your story was so important to me when I was younger, excuse me, that I carried around the book written by Bud Hopkins for at least 15 years. And it became kind of tatty and torn. And I even bought the mini series. Now, can you tell us how much they went away from the original story in regards to the movie itself, the miniseries. Because I think if people watch Intruders, the miniseries, they're going to think it's fact unless you specify.
Yeah, I've had this question so many times at conferences and stuff when people come up to me and say, "Oh, I remember in the movie when this and this happened," and I felt bad because I have to look at them and say, "Well, that wasn't me. That didn't happen to me." What happened was Tracy Torme bought like 18-month, like the rights to the name and the story and to develop something. And in the end, pretty much directly out of the book was only maybe a couple of scenes. The one at the end with the little girl that came from the book. That was came from mine, although it wasn't exactly. And the title, Intruders, pretty much. And everything else was a compilation of what I'm told was everything else was a compilation of real cases, compiled into one or two characters, and then Hollywood license for spice because, they love it spicy. But, for shock value or whatever. But, and I was really disappointed in the beginning. For several years, I was really disappointed because I was hoping that somebody was going to do an actual, story about our life and the actual things that happened to us, because I thought it was interesting and somehow could help other people. But as I got older and as years passed, I began to realize that it was actually a good thing. And it was a good thing because it was one of the first things ever done about the subject seriously. There wasn't a laugh track. There wasn't corny jokes. They didn't try to throw a bunch of hokey crap into it. They took the subject matter seriously and brought it to mainstream and gave people an opportunity to look at it in a different way, kind of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind did on the big screen, and I felt in that respect, I began to realize, no, it really, even though you were disappointed because it wasn't exactly, about your whole family and your story, it was a good thing. And I am happy that they did it. And I'm proud that they did it with our, intruders on it, because I think that it opened up a lot of people's eyes and woke people up to a new way of thinking, kind of expanded their paradigm a little bit. So
The movie case itself actually says, "Intruders, you will believe." And I have to say, I did after reading that book. I was like, wow, it changed my worldview. Very good book. Um, I am going to be reading your book.
Did you get it?
Not yet, but when I do,
It's on the way.
I will get back to you. Maybe we'll have you on again and we'll review your book.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're more than welcome to be here. We've had a lot of people in the chat that have expressed interest in your story and find it very inspirational. So thank you for that. Tommy?
Yeah, you really do tell the story so well, Deb, and we're just thrilled that you're here with us. My goodness, I do remember as a child I saw the miniseries, and it was like a family event. My family was also into UFOs. We lived very close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Oh,
so
okay.
so even in school, grade school, teachers would talk about UFOs and things like that. It was a thing, it was something that people talked about. The alien Roswell crash and all that, the pieces being brought to Wright-Pat and all of that business. But really, I think you tell the story very, very well. We're just very thrilled to have you here. And again, like Tim said, if we'll take a look at your book, and we'd love to have you back anytime.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah, I'd be glad to. There's just so much that I can't talk. I can't get in an hour and a half or a couple hours.
Sure.
So, and it's I just appreciate the opportunity and I appreciate the support.
We did have somebody in the chat room ask if you know if alien grays their skin, does it change color as they age?
I don't know. Honestly,
Right,
I don't know.
right. And
Or if they age at all.
their hands have 3 fingers, correct?
That's what I remember. But I know a lot of people remember all different things. So,
And no thumb.
you know what? I don't think so. I think one of those fingers kind of like that, kind of like a
Okay.
thumb.
And you said earlier before the stream that one was longer than the other two.
Yeah. Hmm.
Did they have claws?
I don't recall that. No.
Okay. All righty. At least these people in the chat now know what they look like and how their arms were and hands were. Thank you very much.
Well, you're
Absolutely.
welcome. I mean, this is the thing. I can tell you guys what I remember. I can tell
Right.
you, the facts that I remember. And then also beyond those, I have my intuition and my opinion, but there's a
Right.
lot of stuff I still don't know.
Right.
There's stuff I still don't remember about my own experiences, and I don't know that I ever will. I figure if I need it, my brain will somehow make it, it'll come back. But I just try to tell people what I remember, and
Right.
the rest is your
I
guess as
I
good as mine.
I do have one last question for you. The woman who Tommy and I both interviewed and know, Yvonne Smith,
Oh
the
yeah.
one who wrote your forward to your book, Extraordinary Contact.
Mhm.
Um, has she regressed you personally?
No.
No. Have you been regressed at all?
By Bud, I was thinking about it last time I was interviewed, and somebody asked me that. I think I've been regressed maybe 5 times.
Okay.
You have to remember, this was Bud lived in New York and I lived in Indiana, and there was no Zoom, there was no cell phones. A long distance phone call was expensive, and so I didn't have much opportunity to be
I'm
regressed by him. So,
right. I remember the long distance phone calls. Yes.
ugh, thank God for cell phones. You young guys don't know what it's like. A phone call to Bud, I'd have to keep my phone calls to Bud like 5 to 10 minutes max, because anything beyond that I couldn't afford.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sure. Yep.
We did a lot of stuff by mail, writing letters
Right.
and drawing pictures and mailing them and stuff.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being here tonight, Deborah. I really enjoyed your story, and I know it well from the book and the movie. And you have clarified some things for me as well as people in the chat room. Tommy?
Absolutely. Deb, thank you very much for being here. It's just been an honor to have you on the program. We really appreciate it. And again, we definitely want to have you back.
Yes.
You have so much more story to tell. And, we do have a little bit of a time constraint here. So, yes, you are always welcome back. Also, I want to go ahead and thank everybody for watching this evening. Really appreciate you coming out for us. Everybody in the chat room, thank you for being here. Next week, we have a very special guest. Tim, would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, we will be interviewing Lou Elizondo next Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. So please show up for that. Maybe we can get to your questions and ask him and see if we can get some answers. Before we leave tonight, we'd also like to thank our paid members to the channel. We have a new one as of late by the name of Patrick Rishton. So thank you, Patrick. Jennifer Adamek, Jeff Garvey, Mr. DB Cooper 77, Occam's Razor, Beats, Donna McFadden, Patrick Rushton, Trevor Williams, Melanie Stark, April Eggerts, Kevin Slayton, Jennifer Stark, and Julie Field. To sign up for our channel, it's only $1.99 a month. You get really cool emojis and some merchandise perks. So check it out. It will help our channel out. Also, thank you to everyone who participated online. We really appreciate your attendance. and to everybody who participated in the chat room. Tommy, any last words?
Just wanted to thank everybody again. Thank Deb. I mean, what a great story. I mean, she tells it so well. I'm literally feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as she tells the story, and that's pretty rare. I mean, we hear a lot of stories, and I got to be honest with you, Deb. Yours is one of the more compelling ones out there. It really is.
Right, you're a legend in our mind.
Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.